Hey everybody, Mark here at Discover Your Home. Thanks again for joining us. Tonight we're going to talk about, it's this time of the year, we're hitting spring, and you're ready to get some work done on the outside of your home. And this is really going out to folks that have a challenge in picking colors and selecting colors for their home, especially when it comes to kind of a large investment, especially on the exterior side of the house. So we're going to address just a couple things, not in great detail because we can probably get into a little bit greater detail on style home and everything, but we're going to talk about, there's 5 or 6 style homes that we see here in the Midwest, and some of the tips that I give to folks and what they can do. And there again, listen, there's no law. This isn't Mark's law or anything. It's your home. Whatever you want. You want bright banana yellow? Go for it. I'm good with it. If that makes you happy and makes the world turn, I'm cool with it. But if you're a little challenged about what you want, hey, I think I can help you out in some minor tips. So let's talk about the few basic homes that we really see in the Midwest area for the most part. So you're going to have contemporary style, which is kind of more, I'd say more California based, where it's the inside and the outside are kind of blending together. Cape Cod, definitely East Coast, high, steep pitch roof, not very ornate, very kind of boxy, but beautiful homes, large porches in some respects. The colonial, Georgian colonial, tall columns, usually either brick. The Georgians are usually brick. More of your colonials, your standard colonials are, lap siding, Dutch lap siding, usually one giant color, with some accents and stuff. Tudor, that's where it's all kind of trimmed out, all the panels and everything are usually a lighter color and trimmed out and darker. So those are the most that we see. And then the old Victorians, as we call them in the business, the painted ladies, where they're large, expanding porches, a lot of gingerbread, a lot of ornate millwork that's done on the home, where you can have 4, 5, 10, 12, I've heard up to 20 colors on some of these homes, and they're absolutely spectacular. We'll get a little bit into that, but we're going to kind of talk about some of the basics that we see out there. And what I always try to focus on first is, let's make sure we take a couple things into consideration. Things that we can't change or we're not changing. So roof color, very important. Your windows, if they're wood and they're going to get painted, then it's a totally different story. But a lot of things now, window-wise, are vinyl or aluminum. People are replacing their windows, the old rickety windows that are wood and they're rotting, and they're just tired of dealing with it. So a lot of folks are going to vinyl and or aluminum windows. So that can be a decision to help you aid in you selecting a color. Your brick or stone color, very important. And the body of the house. I always try to get folks, when they're looking at the house, first let's start with the body of the house. So we're going to talk first about the contemporary home. There's a builder in the northern Chicagoland area that does a lot of more of a contemporary style. Some people call it California look. It's contemporary. It's really designed to kind of flow with, trees in the background. Usually earth tones in its nature. What I generally try to guide folks on contemporaries, it's either a 1 color or a 2 color application, and it's not a dramatic contrast. It's usually very subtle. It's what I call tone on tone. So let me see if I can kind of show you on camera here. I'm just going to pull a chart up here, and I don't know how well these show up, but tone on tone to me is something where It's say this is kind of a medium gray. This is just a little bit more gray, so it's very close in its tone. Just a slight darker or a slight shade darker or a slight shade lighter. I always recommend selecting the body first. When it comes to contemporaries, my personal opinion is I like them to be one color. I think it seems to fit for the style of home. There again, gets back to your home, your vision. Earth tones are great, grays are great. It really gets back to where your home is situated, what kind of trees you have around, your flowers, what color is the roof? Is it a cedar shake roof? I mean, so there's a lot to take into consideration. So don't take everything I'm saying as law. Just take a look at these things. A lot of the older homes in the contemporary have like darker window trim. It's either kind of a dark bronze or even like a clay color. Usually you don't see a lot of white vinyl windows on contemporaries. You usually see as probably light as a kind of a sand color up to a real dark bronze. Okay, so that's contemporary. My suggestion, one color or tone on tone. Keep it real close. Okay, so Cape Cods. When we're doing Cape Cod homes, we don't see a lot here, but I would say probably one in every 10 to 15 homes might be a Cape Cod that we run across. And there's no rule of thumb in there. I find that they're not tremendously ornate, very simple, and they're beautiful homes. I love Cape Cods. There's something quaint is the word I would probably use best with Cape Cod homes. Usually the siding's a larger lap siding, not in all cases, but in the cases I see here in the Midwest, definitely a little bit larger, 1x10 siding. What I generally see is there's a color, it's called Cape Cod Gray. A lot of the Cape Cods are Cape Cod Gray, white, and occasionally you'll see a light yellow, kind of a marigold or a buttercup yellow, really stunning. There again, it gets back to the roof. I find that most of the ones that we see here are the roofs are gray or black. I don't know why, if that's just the way it is, but it seems like that's it. So very simple, very basic in its approach. Keep a one body color to it. A lot of times you don't find corner boards and even soffits that are painted a different color. Usually it's one color where we're accenting some shutters or say the dormers, the trim on the dormers, and then really making, because that front door on a Cape Cod really kind of stands out at you. Making a bold statement with that front door with a bright red, a deep blue. I'm going to grab a chart here. I'll show you kind of some of the colors that we've seen and or recommended. And it really depends on the kind of timing. Back in the 90s, what we saw was, let me see here. We gotta move that there. Okay, I'm back. Something popped up on my screen. Back in the 90s, we saw a lot of deep greens, Kelly greens. Now we're seeing a lot of blues, teal blues, cranberry colors. Benjamin Moore classic burgundy, the top color there, beautiful color. The color down below that also, the charcoal slate, nice. And then there's Hamilton blue down at the bottom there. Those are some great door colors for your Cape Cod home. Okay, now it's moving on. Colonial and Georgian colonial. I find that most of our colonials are very light in nature. White seems to be, I would say, 7 out of 10. Most of the colonial style homes I see are either white or some version of an off-white, a Navajo white, or softer. I'm trying to think of another name for a color, softer. Usually white though, and then they're very stark contrast, really deep color shutters, like a deep plum, black, charcoal gray, somewhere that kind of picks up the roof line, what's in the roof. Usually on our typical colonial style here, if it's white, you usually see white windows. So not a lot of choices going on there. You don't see a lot of these taupey grays and the clay colors and the darker colors on colonial style. White seems to be a big driver. It seems to be nice contrast. The bolder the contrast really drives that selection. And then getting back to that front door, because that front door, that entry can really pop, or you can kind of blend it in. It gets back to your personality. I really am a big believer to draw attention to your house is just to give that really make that color on that front door just really pop, make it bold, makes a real bold statement. Okay. Georgian colonial, there again, it's generally mostly brick. You'll see the tall columns, white trim. There's many different ways that we can go on that, but I find that white's a big driver on those too. And then because the windows are usually white, the trim around them is usually white, and then you accent your shutters to generally the brick. We find that a lot of the Georgians that I've seen, roofs are either black or kind of a charcoal slate color. All right, so we got the Tudor and the Victorian. The Tudor, Benjamin Moore's got a color called Tudor Brown. I would say that's probably the most popular. What we see, white or Navajo white on the stucco panels, and then everything's trimmed out. What I'm also seeing is a tone on tone. We did a home not too far back that we ended up doing a tone on tone where it was kind of a clay, we'll call it a taupe color, and then we went to a darker taupe on the trim, and it really kind of looked unique because it had just enough of a color that at first it's hard to look and see if there's a difference, but that's for somebody that's willing to kind of take a risk. Really standard with that, whites, off-whites on the panel, something very soft. I'm trying to think of the other Benjamin Moore color we use a lot on the outside. Sailcloth, that's it. Sailcloth's another nice looking color on the exterior of your home, especially on the Tudors. And then going to the dark browns, Tudor brown. We've even gone to where we're doing some deeper taupes. Somewhere you are seeing a greater contrast. I would say majority of the homes are Tudor style are that. They have a greater contrast. And as far as the door on those, it's funny because this is the one style home I'm not a real big fan of putting that big accent on the door. I try to actually incorporate it in the color of the body of the house and the brick usually on the front of the house if there's brick, which there usually is. So, in fact, I think almost all the homes there have a brick on them. So, okay. And the Victorian, it really gets back to Victorian. You pick a color and roll with it because it can be endless. I've seen yellow. My personal favorite, I love kind of a soft. Let me see if I can find a color that really kind of comes to my mind as far as outsides on a Victorian. I love yellow when it comes to Victorians. I think it gives such a unique, classy look to a home, and there's a lot of ways to accent it. Montgomery white is probably the color I'm thinking of most, but I know there's another yellow that I'm shaking my head here. I know it's here. Give me a second here. Hawthorne yellow. I'm gonna throw that one out there. It may not show up terribly well. HC4 Hawthorne yellow. Beautiful color. Looks great. You can accent it with blues, plums, black, deep black or charcoal. Really just a soft, subtle color. Goes well with white. You can tint the white down a little bit to soften it up so it's not so stark, so it doesn't look sometimes whites can look a little grayish. So you can kind of tone that down, possibly even doing like a sailcloth as a trim. So, but then going from there with the gingerbread, it's whatever trips your trigger, as I like to say. It really gets back to your personality and how much time and money you want to invest into that painted lady. So those are a couple things that we look for. Consider roof color, consider your window color, your stone and brick color. Try to incorporate it, try to make it all blend, or you're going to go the opposite and it's going to be a great contrast. I always tell folks, drive around your neighborhood. Usually in a subdivision, you're going to find a house that's similar to yours. Now, it doesn't have to be exact. The brick might be a little different, the roof color might be a little different, but you kind of know what you want. And I always tell folks, when you're buying a car, you go out, and I know there's not as many colors in cars, but something really appeals to your eye. That's kind of where I go with it. It's usually a visceral reaction when you're looking for a color. You say, would that look good on my house? So drive around the neighborhood. If you don't like your neighborhood, find another neighborhood, find the same kind of style of your house. That's a great place to start. 2, these large multi-billion-dollar paint companies make these charts for a reason, and some of them have color combinations that are put together. Use them. They're great ways to make your life a lot easier. I know Sherwin-Williams has one or two. I know Benjamin Moore has a couple. These are things that are all tested and put together by professionals, and they give it to you. So what better deal could that be? Third tip, if you want a designer to come out or talk with your team that's going to come out and do the work at your home, if they feel comfortable in consulting on colors, talk with them. Okay? Worth the money. I'll tell you what, getting out there and making sure you ask your professionals what their thoughts are. Because, if they've been at the business and they know what they're talking about, they're going to give you, because they want it to look good. At the end of the day, they want it to look beautiful for you, and that leads to usually more business down the road. And finally, off of these charts, there's usually like 3 that you can pick from. Don't be afraid to substitute one of the colors in. You might find a taupe with an off-white and it's got a plum colored door, and you hate plum or purple. That's not your color. Then find something that will work within it, because there will. You're not married to just the idea of the 3 there. And usually they'll give you a body, a trim, and an accent. Sometimes flip-flop the trim and the accent with the body and use the other as the accent and trim. Okay? I think that's a good starting place for you at beginning of this year, ready to get the outside work done in your house. I want to thank you again for joining us. And I'm Mark, and this is Discover Your Home. Have yourself a great evening. Thanks again for joining us.